Unemployed and Afraid acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this episode on and of the land where you, the listener, are tuning in from. We would like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and extend our respect to any First Nations, Aboriginal, and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today, acknowledging that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land.
Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, a podcast that explores the messy middle of being out on your own and starting over with the people who've done it. I'm your host, Kim Curtin. Thank you for being here. Let's get into today's story of starting over. Welcome back to Unemployed and Afraid, where we explore the glorious mess of creating brands, businesses, and career do-overs, chatting with the people who have done it. And my guest today, she is all about it. If you've been on this pod with me for a while, you'll know how much I love getting into this stuff. We just don't talk about often enough. And I feel insanely #blessed that my guest today, Leah Selfe, the productivity queen, is 100% down to go there with me. She is, just all-round awesome and fierce, really, a total energy giver. And in this chat, we talk about being driven to succeed and create a life that truly serves you and your family, the challenges she faces in doing that as a single mum, the confusing space of figuring out where to start when you've spent a lifetime in one industry but want to move on. Literally, how to figure out what business to start, not even just how. Why Google is your best friend at all stages, and the power of connecting with other people in business at any level, just others who really get where you might be at. I love this chat for so many reasons, but mainly because it's a timely reminder that you don't have to have it all figured out. You can tweak, play, change, and Google your way through just about anything on the journey to creating a life that you love, which is what it's all about. Am I right? I mean, surely I'm right. I hope you enjoy this highly productive chat. How's that for a segue? My guest today is Leah Selfe, your resident productivity queen. Is that not just the coolest title ever? Leah works with women who are passionate about impacting others through their teachings and knowledge. She's the go-to automation strategist for fine-tuning processes, creating business systems that work, and automating workflows for easier business operations. Or in short, she's the gal who helps women be more productive in their business, kick goals, and get shit done. She's passionate about creating the lifestyle she deserves for her and for her son, which means building a sustainable business that encourages lifestyle. And that's what she does for others. In fact, if you're a loyal listener, you may have heard previous guest Alicia from The Social Impact give Leah a shout out for helping her create her 6-figure business and support her on the journey by kicking her butt on the reg. I couldn't wait to chat with Leah because honestly, I feel like simply the thought of some of this stuff can be the thing that just stops people who want to create a new career or business. It just pauses them in their tracks and it all feels too hard. So I can't wait to hear your journey, Leah, about getting started in your own business and helping others sort their shit out. Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid.
Thank you so much, Kim. Honestly, that bio, I'm going to steal that and put it onto my website because the one that I have isn't even close to how amazing that one is.
Oh, thank you. I will absolutely send that to you.
Oh, perfect.
So look, a little get to know you first, I think is always fun before we get into the busy stuff. So tell me, how do you think your son would describe you?
Oh, wow. Hit me with the hard stuff. I instantly started to tear up when you asked me this question, which is, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I would say that he would describe me as very driven, passionate, hardworking, and a bit of a hard ass at the same time. I run a pretty tight ship. I'm a single mum, so it's very much that struggle, and I never like to call it work-life balance because I feel like that's just utter bullshit. But I think he's starting to really understand why I put so much effort in and why I put so much time. So yeah, I definitely feel like he is proud of what I do. And he's starting to get older, he's 13 this month, he's really starting to understand why I'm doing all this hard work and why I'm putting in all this hard effort.
What's his name?
His name's Charlie.
Oh, shout out Charlie. I'm sure he'd be very, very proud of everything that you're doing. So take me way back, Leah. Let's go before you were the reigning productivity queen. Who were you?
Who was I? So I won't go too far back because we don't have like the next 10 hours to talk about it. But I'll go back to where I think was a pivotal point in my life and kind of bring us up to where we are now. So I became a mum at 21, 2 weeks before my 21st birthday. and went back to a full-time working career when he was 3 months old, and have pretty much worked every day since then. And I think it's always come down to wanting to work and wanting to provide and not wanting to feel like I have to exchange one thing to another. So I've worked in a range of industries. My biggest career accomplishments to date have been in the travel and event industry. I worked for Flight Centre and CI Events for close to 8 or 9 years. And then I also worked in the hotel industry doing events as well for another year and a bit prior to COVID. So it's really been, I don't know, I've always seen myself working. I'm not built to be a stay-at-home mum. I tried for about 4 months and it was the worst for once in my life. I love you, Charlie, but please don't ever make me do that again. The hands down to the women that do it. But that's me. I'm a mum and I work really fucking hard because I want to create a life for myself and for my son. And, you know, even from way back, that has always been what I wanted to do. I wanted to work. I wanted to succeed. The people pleaser in me wanted to prove that I could do it and, you know, make sure that I did it well. But yeah, I've always been a hard worker. But that's probably the biggest things in my life is working so involved in the travel and the event industry. And that's what I loved. I loved moving thousands of people and getting them to events and creating incentive trips. And it's just a whole different world. You never really understand what's behind the scenes when you go to a conference. And then when you actually learn it, it's amazing.
I just imagine there is so much organization required in something like that.
It's amazing. I love it. It's almost the thrill of it. My biggest and best days were like, and some people would find this awful, but I would love it when a client would call me from the airport and be like, I've missed my flight, or the flight's delayed, or the flight's been canceled, or the hotel's not letting us check in. It was like, I would almost go into like superhero, like kick ass, let me just get this shit organized mode. And I would just be like, don't even worry about it. I'll fix it. I'll call you as soon as it's done. And it was just like that adrenaline rush of problem solving and, you know, not thinking anything was a mountain out of a molehill. Just get in, get it done, and make it happen. So I loved it.
Oh my God, I am in awe of you. There's one part of me that's like, you absolute sicko. Love that. That is really admirable. And I feel like everybody is going to need a Leah on their team. If there's any like senior executives here, she's got her own business already.
It's like, don't get me wrong, in my personal lives, I catastrophize and overanalyze anything. But when it comes to business and like problem solving, it's like, yeah, totally relatable. It's like, just get it done. There's a problem out there. There's always a solution for it. So just fucking do the shit. Whatever you got to do the shit, get it done, fix, tick. All right, let's move on to the next thing. It's fun though. I do enjoy it. It does make me a bit of a sicko. Some people are like, oh my God, what is your problem? And I'm like, oh, I thrive on that adrenaline of fuck ups.
I love it. I love it. So tell me, I mean, that role sounds pretty exciting. It sounds like it was a big part of your life. Were there any challenges in that, or was there something that sort of made you think, maybe I'm sort of done here?
Yes and no. I loved the career that I had in my head and in the vision of where I saw myself in the company and what I was going to be doing. But then I also think it came down to, I was just tired. It is a very sales commission-based job. So if I'm not working, I'm essentially not getting paid. So for a long period of time, I had always placed my career and my job and my success above everything else. And that included my son. You know, I was working sometimes 6-7 days a week, 12, 14-hour days. And I didn't do it because I felt like I had to. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But I just got a bit tired. So there was an opportunity for the office to move and I didn't want to make that move and commute every day. So I decided to leave. It was really hard for me because I did love what I did. But I think it was also, you know, a bit of divine intervention going, I think it's time for you to slow down, take a step back and just have a look at what you're doing with your life. So yeah, it was hard. And I think the biggest challenge for me was just realizing that I think I'd done my time. I'd had my fun and now it was time to rethink some of those priorities in my life. And yeah, the hours were a little bit of a challenge sometimes, but you know, 3 o'clock in the morning, wake up call from an airline. Even to this day, I'd still be like, all right, let's go.
I imagine that was, I guess, particularly given that you were a single mum and really focused on providing the life that you wanted to have for yourself and for your son. I can imagine that came with a lot of financial scare, thinking, all right, I'm going to step away from this and I'm not sure what's coming next. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, definitely. So I think after being made redundant, I was officially unemployed for 5 days, which is the longest I've been unemployed for. And I think I technically did have a world record breakdown in that 5 days. I had people telling me it's fine, like you're going to find a job, you're amazing at what you do. But I just had this, like, I'd made the decision to not further myself with that company. But then I'd also realized that I'd spent so much time with that company that my skills were quite unique and quite stuck to a certain sector in industry. So that was where I was quite struggling with regards to, like, holy shit, how the fuck am I going to transfer what I've learned for the last 8 or 9 years that is so industry specific to another career or another job? So yeah, but very quickly I was within 5 days, I was offered another role, still within the events industry, but on the hotel side. So slightly different. But yeah, it was hard because I didn't have a backup plan when I left. And for a split second, it was almost like before I signed the papers, I was like, it's going to be fine. And then I signed the redundancy papers and I was like, fucking shit, what am I gonna do? Like, what is my backup plan? And then yeah, it was more so just like, oh my god, what am I gonna do and how am I gonna make this work? But yeah, very quickly I was approached for another role. But it is hard because it's that I'm a single income. It's my responsibility to not only look after myself, which I think if it had just been me, totally different story, but I'm now responsible, or have been responsible, for this human being that I have to feed and clothe and keep alive. And in order to do that, I need money. So it's like, I also need to make sure that I'm able to transfer from one job to the next and make it as smooth as possible. So yeah, it was fucking hard.
Yeah, I just so relate to the everything's fine. Oh my God, I'm having a breakdown. Quick succession of feelings to, yeah, what am I doing with my life? So tell me, when did the idea for your business start to seed?
So my idea for becoming a virtual assistant and starting my own business actually happened about 2 or 3 years prior to COVID. And it was that moment of, like, we all have it. We're in our corporate jobs and we're like, fuck this, I'm going to go and do my own thing. I'm going to start a business. And you get all these beautiful ideas and then you sit down and you're like, wait, I work 80 hours a week. How am I going to start a business? So that very quickly went on the back burner and got stuck on a shelf that, didn't get taken off for a long time. And this sometimes can be a contentious subject for some people. And I don't hold what has happened over the last couple of years to any particular lower level of standard or impact for anybody else. But COVID has been one of the best things that has ever happened to me. I was given a role about 12 months and 3 days to be exact, prior to when COVID hit. So I was working in the hotel industry, which obviously coming into COVID was going absolutely nowhere. We were all stood down, very realistic about that. And I knew that coming to what was originally going to be the end of September, where pandemic payments were going to finish and everything would just kind of go back to normal. I'm not a pessimist, but I'm also not optimistic. I'm a bit more of a realist in that way, where it's like, okay, well, these things aren't like in the movies and we don't just automatically get this magic cure that comes and everybody takes a mini tablet and everything's fine. Like, I knew we were going to be in it for the long haul. So I decided that I had pretty much from the March when I was originally stood down, I wallowed in my self-pity and ate all the ice cream and watched all the Netflix for about a month and a half. And then I decided very quickly that I had less than 6 months basically to come up with another plan, because again, I was very much in that similar situation where 12 months prior to that, I was being made redundant, and I knew that the hotel that I was in, the industry that I was in, the role that I was in, that there was a very good chance that I was going to be made redundant again. And I kind of came to that realization of, okay, right, well, if I'm going to be made redundant twice in less than a 2-year period, I need to put myself in a position where that can't happen to me again, where I can be held responsible to what happens to me in my future. And that is exactly where it was born. It was born out of fear, and it was born out of this rat race of trying to build up a business quick enough to provide me with the same level of income that I had prior, knowing full well that at a certain point, that income was going to end. And yes, obviously people are like, oh, but you got made redundant, so you would have got a payout. Yeah, well, that money doesn't just sit in a bank account and never get used. The money that I was getting from the pandemic leave wasn't even close to covering the costs that I had. So no, there was a lot of bills being paid off. I got rid of as much debt as I could with my redundancy, because I knew that I needed to come into this business with a clean slate and as fresh as possible. So yeah, it did come out of fear, and it did come out of wanting to create something as as quickly as possible. But I honestly do feel like without COVID, I don't think I would be where I am now and have achieved both professionally, but I think more so personally. I have learned so much about myself in the last 2 years that I don't think anyone really understands when you work in a corporate career. One of the first things I got asked when I started the business was, who am I? And I was like, oh shit. I've always been an employee. I've always been the person who reports to this person, who reports to that person, because that's the job that I have. And this is the company that I work for. And it was like, shit, I actually don't know who I am. I don't know what I love. I don't know what I enjoy doing because I've always been told who I was. I've always been told how I had to represent myself. And I'd always been told how to do my job and how to turn up and how to do the things. So yeah, sorry, that was probably a really long-winded version of how the fuck did you come up with this?
I think it was a perfectly winded version of how did you come up with this. And honestly, listening to you speak then, I felt like I was getting a little bit emotional because the feeling that you tap into there about feeling really tied to what you do as an employee, I mean, that was a big motivator for me leaving my previous career and my previous workplace that by all other measures, I should have been very happy in. But just that sensation of, oh my God, who am I? What do I like? What do I like? What even am I without this thing, this title and this, I guess, personality or identity that's given to you by somebody else? Yeah, you've really tapped into a feeling that a lot of us might feel, but not be able to articulate without time and without reflection. And, even in the moment, it's really hard to say, do you know what? I just need to go figure my shit out and figure out who I am and be able to show up to a party and not say, this is what I do. And then yay, there's that feeling of status and ego and all that sort of stuff. It's like, well, when you take that all away, what's left?
For years, I had walked into networking and parties and just hanging out with friends, and people would be like, oh, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm a travel agent. I spent nearly 10 years saying that. How do I then disassociate myself from a role that has basically been a third of my life? That's a huge part of my life and my career. And I think it's really important, even if you are still in your corporate career, to actually finish that sentence. Hi, my name is insert name here, and I am, and do not put in your job title. What comes after that? Because if you can't instantly bring that to your forefront and say it, then that's what you need to be looking into further, because that's where I feel like that work-life juggle can be really hard for some people because they can't actually, I don't want to use the word disassociate, but remove themselves from work because that's how they identify themselves. I mean, if that's your business and you identify as Mark Zuckerberg, the guy who runs Facebook, that's totally fine. But you were someone before you started that career, and you're going to be someone after you leave that career. So in that in between, why would you want to lose that purpose and sense of self purely for the fact that somebody else is writing your paycheck? I think is something that a lot of people really need to think about.
I could not agree more. A really cool line of thinking and a really good motivator for just going on an exploration to figure out what's next for you and what you might create. And that leads us perfectly into when you started looking at this, you started thinking, okay, what am I going to do? What's going to come here? What first step did you take to move in this new direction?
I love this question and I love answering it because I think sometimes people think it's this overcomplicated, she must have done all this research and had to look at all these reports and was going out there and getting testers and feelers, and no, that could honestly not from the truth. So one of the things that I love, and I love following Amy Porterfield over in the US, and something that she advocates for is it's called a Post-it note party. Now, I didn't realize that it was a thing. This was just something that I did. And then when I started following her, I was like, oh, cool. I'm not just this crazy person that likes Post-it notes from Officeworks.
Insert, oh my God, I love Post-it notes so much.
Insert sorry to my accountant. You're probably going to have to write off a few of those this year. So a Post-it note party is basically what I did. I kind of got to this realization where I was like, all right, I know how to do all of this stuff, but how the fuck am I going to turn all of this stuff into a business, right? Because, I don't know what my transferable skills are. I don't know how I can take something from A to Z when all I've done is A to B. So I put on some R&B music because that's my lady jam and I love to get all sexy and do my Post-it note party. Oh, love it. And I basically, on one wall of my very small apartment at the time, I put on Post-it notes everything that I had ever done, everything that I had ever achieved, every role that I had done, every job description that I had ever, agreed to, any task, anything that I had completed in my 15-year career in the corporate world went onto that wall. from there, I basically started to group things together. And I realized really quickly some of the things that I was really good at was project management, helping people to get to something quicker. And I really just like to get shit done. That was something that I was really good at. Just give me a task, give me a deadline, and I will sure as hell make sure it gets done. Probably before, because I'm a people pleaser, but I will make sure the shit gets done. And that was what I really, like, I just realized like that was what kept jumping out to me. So then I just went to Google. And I was like, I just typed in project manager, assisting with tasks, likes to get stuff done. That's literally what I typed into Google, because I was like, I don't know how to put all that into a business. And then slowly I started to kind of rife through a lot of the results that were coming back, and a virtual assistant was starting to become the common thread. And I was like, okay, I can do this. I can help people get shit done. Like, that's seems easy, right? And then it was like, okay, well, if I'm going to be a virtual assistant, how does that work? How do I even set this up? So Google was my best friend for like the first 3 months of my business, because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to figure it out. So I literally birthed this COVID business baby from throwing post-it notes on a wall and just seeing literally what sticked. Basically, my whole concept was, if I do this post-it note party and I come out with nothing, then my worst case scenario is I go and get a job until I find out what I love. That was it. I knew I had transferable skills to go and be like at a retail store, or to go, God forbid, have to work like another sales commissions job, but I knew that I could. So it wasn't like I knew I didn't have options, but there was a part of me that was like, I don't want to have to do that. I do not want to have to go back to putting my career and my finances in the hands of somebody else. I just can't do it anymore. So yeah, that is how my business started, was literally post-it notes on a wall and then rushing to Google once I figured out there was a common thread, and hoping and praying to God that somebody else had the similar idea and had already written something about it online. Thank God they had, because God knows where I'd be right now if they hadn't.
I absolutely love that for so many reasons. Just figuring it out and giving yourself the time to go through it, and not putting all that pressure to have the idea first and then kind of retrofit it. I just think that's such excellent sharing, and such an important message for anybody else out there going through the same thing. But what I really love about that as well is you went and looked for people who might be in a similar sort of vein, a similar sort of thinking. And I think that can sometimes be a stopper, or something that gives people pause. Oh, well, I can't do that because too many exist already, or somebody else is doing it in a similar way. Or, oh, I really like how they described that and how they've profiled that. You see somebody else's end goal of doing it and feel like, oh, well, nothing's going to be as good as that, so I might as well not try.
Yeah.
And it can be such a stopper for people, but there's only one version of you and your unique skill set and what
Thank
you
God there
bring
doesn't need to be two versions of me.
I don't know. I feel like we'd be a very productive society if we had more versions of you. But your unique skill set, the industry you've come from, the problems that you've solved are always going to be different to somebody else. So it's just that stop and pause moment to be like, yeah, I'm inspired by this person. I'm expanded by seeing that they're doing it. Now I can see what's possible. Okay, what's the me version of this? Like, so rare. Not everyone is going to create a unicorn that doesn't exist, that solves a perfect problem for society. How many of those can there be, and why does it need to be that in order to be a legitimate and a self-fulfilling journey? We just get stopped so many times thinking that it's not big enough, or it's not this enough, or it's not that enough. But it's just, that's how it needs to be. Have a look, see what's going on, figure your stuff out, power through, make your own thing. Like, there's billions of people. So take me through, I guess, that process of Google starting to form. How did the form sort of roll out and change through that period? And what were some of those steps? Because in my head, I'm imagining that you're like, it's this. And then you go to sleep, you wake up the next morning, like, no, maybe it's this. So take me on that journey a bit.
Yeah, definitely. So I think in the very early stages, we're quite lucky in the fact that I did have someone, my neighbor at the time, who was looking for someone to kind of just help out with some admin work, which was great. It really was a good opportunity for me to kind of just dip my toes in and actually see if it was something that I really enjoyed. And when I say lucky, I do look back at that particular time when I started my business, and there was still so much work out there. Like, it wasn't like I was, oh my God, I can't find anything, I'm now having to scrounge around and figure out what to do. There is so much work out there, but it was just really lucky that I was able to work quite closely with someone and really I used the term all the time, get balls deep and figure out if that's exactly what I wanted to do, right? But very quickly, I started to realize that there was a lot of things that I liked doing, a lot of things that I didn't like doing. And anybody who listens to this podcast, if you were ever working for Flight Centre, you will know the term flight mares. So as a travel agent, we were always encouraged to keep a notebook next to our bed, just in case we woke up in the middle of the night and we had a flight mare. Instead of having to freak out about it, we would just write it down and it would be like our instant to-do list for the next day. So I have always slept since I've worked in that career with a notebook next to my bed, and I would fall asleep and then I would wake up at random times in the night and be like, actually, I wonder what it would look like if I did this in the business. And then I go back to sleep. Yeah, no, I don't want to do that particular task anymore. Okay, let's look into something else. So it was really like this trial and error. I didn't walk into the business going 100%, these are the tasks that I'm going to do. These are the people that I'm going to work with. This is exactly what I'm going to do. Because to be honest, I had no fucking idea. It was literally like, I am a generalized virtual assistant and I work with everyone, right? Which is the complete opposite of what someone tells you to do when you start a business, right? Find your niche, find that tiny little dot that you want to work with. I was like, fuck the dot. I want to work with everybody. Like, I want to know exactly who I like working with. And yes, I've had some clients that I took on the job and we realized really quickly it wasn't the right fit, but we got the job done and we've moved on. And that's totally fine. But through that trial and error, especially in that first 3 to 6 months, it was throw it. If it hits the wall and it sticks, great. And then I'll just move on and we'll keep going with it. If it doesn't stick, that's fine. I'll write it in my notebook. So next time I come across a client or a project that is similar to that, I know the experiences and I know that that's not something that I want to do. So it was really honestly a lot of trial and error, but I actually enjoyed the experiment of it. I enjoyed going, let's just give it a go. Let's just see if it works. And if I enjoy it, we'll go with it. I wasn't trying to take calculated risks. I was literally just trying to figure out exactly what I loved to do and what I could see myself doing for the foreseeable future. I think that's really important too. It's like not just about what you want to do now, but what you want to do for the future of your business, which may change, but it's always, I think, good hindsight to have that list of almost fallbacks that you're like, it's cool. I know how to do this. I know I can love it. So it's totally fine.
It's just so much about that test and learn, isn't it? And it's scary to operate like that sometimes, because one thing I get really hung up on, and I find we talk about a lot in these conversations, is the balance between needing to go through the process and figure it out, and then trying to also advertise yourself in a way or create the narrative that you need to attract the clients that you want to experiment with, and how the two just do not. It is a non-fitting sandwich. It's like every day it's chicken or the egg, So what was your experience like with that? I guess trying to find, attract the client, so have a brand proposition, but also be in that test and learn phase of what you were doing.
I think for me, it came down to something that we spoke about earlier and figuring out who I was, because I realized really quickly I didn't figure out who I was very quickly. Still learning, guys. It's a journey, but it was very much like, right, if I am going to show up as me, I need to at least attract clients that are fine with me. I swear I'm pretty cruisy. I'll have a conversation with people, but I'll still kick your ass. I'll still make sure things get done, but I'm going to do it in my way because I don't have to pretend to be somebody else anymore. So it very much came around trying to be really clear on who I was as a person. Now, don't get me wrong. For the first 6 to 8 months, possibly even longer, I was still transitioning from that corporate vibe to that personal brand vibe. So even the first photo shoot that I did was quite corporate. A lot of the content that I was creating was quite corporate, but I also wasn't consistent with creating a lot of the content because it didn't feel right to me. And it wasn't until I met some ladies at a retreat that I did actually earlier this year, and they met me and they were like, if I was to look at your Instagram feed, we are not sitting in the same room as this person. And I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, that's probably a good tip. I probably should change that. So once I got people in initially, when I first started the business, they got to know me and they got to know my personality. And quite quickly we learned if it didn't work or it didn't fit. But a lot of the stuff that I was portraying was still quite muted and still quite corporate. So yeah, it was hard. I wanted to get people in and I wanted to get people on board to, one, work with them, but also to experiment and see if it was going to be something that I enjoyed. But then I was worried about 100% being myself because I wasn't sure if that was exactly what they wanted. But I knew once I got them in and I showed them my personality, then it would be fine. So it was like, yeah, it was this really hard juggle between showing up as myself, but afraid almost to think that would be too much. Whereas now I'm like, take it or leave it, motherfuckers. Like, this is me.
Oh, I say it almost every episode, but there's always a message that I need to receive as part of these conversations. And I feel like you just landed it for me. I think that is such an important message. It's back to that narrative and that thing you want to portray, what you think a business owner is, or what you think a podcast host is, or what you think whatever is. You try to portray that.
Oh,
and then
yeah.
there's just an aspect of it that just makes it harder trying to promote yourself. It all just feels hard because it doesn't feel real.
So true.
And that's just such a challenge to get by. It takes a lot of courage to show up as you actually are. So big congratulations to you for owning that. And it's nice to hear that it's a journey, because it really is. And that you may change in 2 years' time. And so that profile might start to change in 2 years' time. And that's so fine. Who cares what anyone else thinks?
Yes.
It's got to be you. And yeah, love it. Take it or bloody leave it. So, in this area of rating your business, we're a little bit further down the line. When did you start to feel like you were kicking some goals yourself and things were starting to come together?
To be honest, probably only in the last, I'd say 3 or 4 months, if I'm going to be brutally honest. Up until that point, it was almost like I was still in survival mode. Just get to the next month, just pay the next lot of bills, get the next lot of clients in. I don't want to say struggle, but just, claw your way through. And then eventually at some point, you'll get to the end and you'll look back and you'll go, oh, thank God I made it. Like, that was basically where I was at. And I think for a long time, and we had discussed this prior to the recording, is that we're so used to seeing a certain level or status of business owners to achieve certain things. And I'd seen so many things like hitting 6 figures and doing this and having this many people in your program. And it was almost like I felt like I wasn't projecting that I was going for those metrics, but I knew internally that I was like, if I could just hit this, yes, I've made it. You know what I mean? And I'd said to myself, like, yep, I just want to hit 6 figures. I just want to hit 6 figures. And I'd put so much pressure on wanting to do it but I wasn't, how do I put this? Like I was putting so much pressure on myself wanting to do it that it wasn't until I realized that it was actually happening that I wasn't even really happy with it anymore. Like I wasn't happy that I was hitting it. There was no massive, oh my God, yes, you finally made it, and yes, I did hit 6 figures in my business and it was really exciting. But then there was also a part of me that was like, if I have to do what I just did again, hell to the no. That's a hard no for me. And I think that's where I've now I don't really give a crap about your metrics. And by certain parts, certain times of the year or so many years to business, you should be hitting this or hitting this. Now I'm like, you know what? I have managed to run a business for 2 years. I now live in a beautiful part of the country. I get to wake up every morning and see the water from my bedroom. I get to spend so much more time with my son, which as a person who's not built to be a stay-at-home mum is sometimes a struggle. But I now get to do the things that I've always said I wanted to do in that 15 years in the corporate world. To me, that means I've made it. That means that I've fucking killed it. And as long as I can continue doing what I'm doing now, and if that means that eventually in the next 6-12 months, I move up and I scale and I grow, then that's totally fine. But I'm now not putting a timer or a time period on what my business looks like. I'm not going in the next 5 years, I must have this. I know that it works. I know that what I'm doing works. And I know that what I'm doing for people makes an impact. For me, that is enough. Anything extra on top of that is an absolute bonus. And I think that's what I've realized in the last 3 or 4 months, where I was like, I've already made it. I've already made the dream possible. I don't need to keep putting pressure on myself to hit another metric or to make sure I have so many people in my course. I just get to do what I fucking love and I get paid for it. I've made it.
That is just such a great message. Reframing that, not how much can I get, but how much do I need to live the kind of life that I want to have. And it's that constant battle, isn't it? Between I feel like I should be hitting this number and be in this type of house or have this type of luxury. Why actually just bring it back? Because then you'll never be satisfied with that. There's always something more to achieve. But how much do you actually need for everything to feel good about what you're doing? That's a really exciting measure. It's such an awareness piece more than anything.
Oh,
it's
God,
just like, oh, hang on a minute. Let me just reframe this a little bit. Let me just settle in here. And when you let go of the plan, the path starts to show itself. True. I had a guess, I'll get this wrong, but when I chatted to her, she said, let not my little goals get in the way of the things I'm meant for. Well,
love that.
You're aiming for this. you just completely miss the amazing thing that could be coming in, that could completely blow your mind away from anything you ever thought and put on a post-it. So that's just really cool. You mentioned a little while ago you went on a retreat, and I've noticed that as a thread through our chat that there's been people in the peripheral that have seemed to be a bit of a support. Tell me about that. Tell me about who you brought in to support you to create this business.
That's a really interesting question, because I feel like it's not even about who I intentionally brought in. It's almost like who I stumbled across. And I can now look back and go, thank God I've got them on my team. They are like my back pocket cheerleaders. They, support me in everything that I do. And it originally started quite early on in the business. I did the thing, built the business. All right, now I have to sign up to all these networking groups, and coming from the corporate world and having to be in networking groups, I was like, this is going to fucking suck, but I'll do it. I got to talk to people. That's what you're meant to do when you run a business. So I did. I joined Business Chicks, turned up to one of their very first virtual meetings, and now can proudly say that I am part of a Business Chicks group on the Gold Coast and Brisbane that I think we have 20 or 25 ladies in the group. We originally started with 4, and there's a couple of ladies in there, Emma Lovell, who runs Lovely Communications, and Caroline Hutchinson, who runs Events Fantastic, I could honestly say have been the biggest support for me over the last couple of years. They have literally seen me from my baby business infancy stage to where I am now. And I'm really glad that I've got them in my back pocket. It's amazing. You don't realize how much you need to talk to people who run a business until you talk to people who don't run a business. Does that make sense?
Total sense.
I've been in conversations with friends and sometimes family, and I just sometimes think that they just don't get it. It's not even about, oh, you can't just duck out for coffee or have a lunch break at a restaurant or whatever. It's like, well, sometimes I have to be up at working at 5 o'clock in the morning because that works for me. And sometimes I'm up working until 10 o'clock at night because that works for me. But they just understand some of the choices and the business decisions that I've made, and they can understand and they can see where that's coming from. So I'm so glad I've got those 2 lovely ladies to always fall back on. But then I've also got obviously the amazing Alicia Mafadia from The Social Impact. She is literally a walking megaphone. Like, cannot thank her enough. If she loves you and she cherishes and understands the passion you have for your business, she will shout it from every rooftop. She will find new rooftops to shout it from. So she is amazing as well. But it's even just that understanding of knowing that I have a group of women in my life that understand business. Most of them are mums, which is great as well. So it's definitely a lot easier to have that conversation. But it's about finding myself and putting myself in the room with the right people. And I'm now working with some amazing women that are also my friends as well, which I think is such a great dynamic. And again, because they're businesswomen and they're solo businesswomen, we can have those conversations. We can be in the room and be talking about the struggles and the hardness and the greatness and the achievements. And there's no judgment. There's no preconceived notions of what we should be doing or how we should be doing. It's just like, let's just chat. Let's just figure it out and we'll make it work. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. I do love it.
That's fantastic. And you're so right. Alicia is just the greatest of good eggs. She's
Yes.
such a lovely, lovely human. And I actually, as you were talking, wrote down Business Chicks because I was like, oh my God, I've been a member for 2 years and I've never even gone to a virtual connector. I just like passively read the emails and passively attend the workshops. But yeah, networking is one of those things that the return on investment of time is threefold to what you ever expect. Just learning from people and being in community with people who understand your journey it's just such an important part. So thanks for that reminder as well.
You're welcome.
So you're where you are now. Your profile as the productivity queen is incredibly attractive to, I think, a lot of business owners or a lot of women. And it does seem as though you've niched down a little bit more because you're focusing on that area of the people who want to share their teachings and knowledge. You're there to help them put that message out in the world. How did that niche come? It's such a great niche because is there anything more important to help people be better versions of themselves and get their message out to bigger audiences and help those people? I mean, it's like a ripple effect. So what drove you to focus in on that area?
I think for me, it came from a lot of doing my own learnings through this whole, trying to figure out how to run a business. And I realized that there was a lot of people that potentially didn't have access to some of the information that they could really use because the people that were providing that information didn't have the time, energy, or understanding of how to not necessarily just get it out there, but do it in a more methodical and productive way so that they could reach more and impact more. And I think that's where that kind of came in to a lot of the people that I work with. And I work with some amazing women who do some amazing things for so many different industries that I think it's really important for me to understand that value that they provide, as much as it may not be relevant to me, knowing that the assistance that I'm giving them is going to help them reach more women and help them educate more women, I think is really important to me. And I think especially as a single mum and as a woman, we are still kind of on the back foot. There's so many more women that have lost jobs during COVID or forced to lose jobs for COVID for many reasons, that I think it's really important that if we can use this time to educate women on understanding what they're passionate about or understanding where their authority sits or giving them that drive and that almost sometimes I think some of them need permission to follow that passion or follow that dream, and then being able to find the right people to help them facilitate that. And if I can work with women who provide that value, provide that message, and provide them with that permission slip to do that, and I can help them do it in a more productive way, in a more sustainable way, so that they can be there for those women for the future, then I'm pretty fucking happy. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning, and I log on and I do the thing and I engage with clients because I know that what I'm doing is helping them reach more women, which in turn is just going to create a pretty kick-ass world of unstoppable women, which I'm totally down for.
Likewise, I love that world.
Yeah.
How does productivity play a role in your business? What things do you use? How do you kick your own ass?
That's a really good question. And I was actually talking to Alicia the other day. I was like, I feel like I need to pay myself to ass kick myself, and then I'd probably pay more attention. And sometimes it can be hard to be productive all the time. And I never claim to be productive 100% of the time. A plumber never fixes his own pipes, and a builder never builds his house properly, right? So don't ever think that if you were to lift the covers on my business, that shit is like 110% schmicko, because it is so not. But I'm aware that there's certain parts of my business that need more productive elements to it. But a lot of the stuff that I use is really just about streamlining. Productivity to me is the end result of having a clear process, a streamlined system, and an automated way of completing it. That then makes you productive. And I think people need to understand that being productive doesn't mean you as a person need to figure it out all on your own. There's so many different things out there that can help you. So Dubsado is one of my favorites. It's a program that I use, and I am certified. Little plug there. But for me, it allows me to send proposals, send contracts, invoice, book calls. I can do call logs on there. I can do automated workflows. So from the moment someone enters a form on my website, 85% of it is pretty much automated, and I just come in and give those human touches when needed. But then a lot of the stuff that I use is also using a system that benefits my business. So I know that I work really well in Google, and I know that I work really well in Asana, and I try to integrate as many of the systems as I have to talk to each other. So it's not necessarily about needing a particular system or app or productivity tip that's going to perfect every single part of your business or your life. It's about looking at what you want to achieve, finding systems and processes that align with that and help you with that, and then using those systems to streamline that process, and then finding ways to automate it if possible. And there's still some parts of my business that I can't automate, and that's totally fine, but I'm always looking. Is that something that I can automate? Is that something that I could streamline? Could I tighten that? Could I make that a bit quicker? Do I need to flesh that out? Do I need to have more steps in that? So it's not always about reining it in. It's always about looking at what your process and your customer experience is and going, how can I make that the best experience without losing that human touch to it? That makes you productive.
That's excellent advice on that automation. And I think a lot of people would be very interested in this is, for such a wonderfully niche world, how do you find your clients? How do you get the word out there about yourself effectively? What's worked? What hasn't?
I have been quite thankful that a lot of the work that I do is word of mouth or referrals, which I do take very much to obviously the kind of work that I do, and the work that I deliver obviously is a huge testament to those referrals and word of mouth. But for me, I think it's also about trying to educate people on what productivity actually means. I think a lot of people really struggle with it. So for me, it's about gaining the right clients who understand that productivity to me is about creating an efficient and sustainable business. It's not about getting there quicker to make more money. It's about getting there in a suitable amount of time to allow you to build an income and build a business that is sustainable, that's going to be here for the next 5 to 10 years. That is what I'm about. And that is what I try to teach a lot of my clients when I work with them as well, is what can we set up now so that 2, 3, 5 years down the track is still going to work for your business. They need to change because your business is going to change, but how can we do that? So that is what I try to emulate and educate through my social media, which is where I try to get a lot of my clients from. But like I said, I've been quite fortunate that a lot of them have come from word of mouth or referrals. So I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing because it's working. So
Leah, you know better than anybody else the value of community and support in business, in creating, in figuring out this journey of creating something special for yourself. So my last question for you today is, how can the listener and I support you on your journey?
Oh, I love this question. So definitely I would say 100% come over and follow me on Instagram. So the.productivityqueen. That's where I share a lot of my knowledge. But for me to have a community to not only support my business, but to support the understanding of what I'm trying to achieve is to really I just would love women in business to stop and have a look at their business. I don't want you to criticize. I don't want you to put yourself down. I just want you to stop and look at it and go, is this sustainable for me? Can I keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, exactly like I'm doing now? And am I okay to keep doing that? The answer is yes. Then don't fucking change a thing. I'm not going to come in and upend your world. If it works, it works. But there may be some opportunities to refine things, but if it works for you, it works for you. But if you sit there and you're like, you know what, I'd really love to just not have to work an extra 2 hours a day. Okay, well, what can you then find in your business to refine, to automate, to allow you to have those 2 hours a day back? That is honestly the hardest thing, is being able to have that conversation with clients and with community. And if they can already have that conversation with themselves before they get to me, it's almost like I don't have to peel back so many layers to figure out exactly what they want. What do you want? Is your business going to give it to you? And if your business is it going to give it to you the way that it's running now? And if it is, great. If it's not, what can we improve? No, we're not going to change anything. We're going to improve on what's already there because it's working, right? It's working for us right now. So we're not going to change it. We're just going to improve on what's there. So that would probably be my 2 things.
They are fantastic things. I'll make sure to link your Instagram into the show notes so that people can go along and follow and connect with you. Leah, it's been so fantastic to lift the lid a little bit on your productivity journey and just get to know you. I just think you're awesome. So thank you for spending time with me today and for sharing so beautifully.
No, thank you so much, Kim. It honestly I love having these conversations because I think it's really important to understand that it's not always an easy road, and people don't just get dropped businesses or ideas on a silver platter in front of them. Some people have to work hard and some people have to figure it out, and I'm still figuring it out like a lot of us are. So I think it's important to let people know that this is totally normal. This is normal. This is part of the process. And one day it'll figure itself out. And then you'll look back and you'll be like, oh my God, it was all fucking worth it. So I'm so glad to have these conversations.
Amen. I mean, I feel like if I can make that my byline, embrace the unemployed and afraid, because it's all part of it. Yes. It rarely ends. It just keeps getting more and more interesting as you go along. I love that.
True.
Thank you so much, Leah.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Unemployed and Afraid, the stories of starting over with your host, me, Kim Curtin. If you liked the episode and are keen to hear more, please hit the follow button and leave a review. And let's keep the conversation going on Instagram @unemployedandafraid, where there's more goodies and links to today's show notes. See you there.